Little pre-show here with my man Mo Tavakolian. I'm saying that right, correctly?
Yes, you are.
All right. I should know that. I mean, I got the Iranian pronunciations down pretty good.
You're pretty good, yes.
Let's see. Wait for the OBS to pick up. And for those of you watching, well, we're waiting for it to kick up. Looks like we're kicked up here. We can go live on Rockfin in 3, 2, 1 there. It is the 13th of July here in 2021. Today on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, my man Hooman Mo Tavakolian joining us from, I'm going to assume, the big city, the Big Apple, New York City. Good morning, my good friend.
Good morning, man. How are you? It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
it's been a while since we talked about coming on. You had the sports diplomacy like PDF, like it was, for lack of a better term, it was a book, and I've been meaning to talk to you about that for years. But then the other book that you put out along with Craig Sesker, Hooman's Hope on a Mission for World Peace. That's kind of what we're going to be talking about mostly today. But we also go into your background a little bit. But first things first, how's the summer been treating you? Everything cool out of COVID out there in New York?
Well, everyone's been working remote, so I've been coming to the office. Manhattan was a ghost town in the beginning of the pandemic. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. The city that never sleeps was actually sleeping. There was nobody on the streets. Traffic was pretty much non-existent. My commute was, 15, 20 minutes, when it's usually an hour. And then eventually started getting better now. Now it's starting to pick up a little bit. There's people on the streets walking around. There's traffic, there's a little tourism going on. So it's starting to come back. It was really depressing last year, to be honest with you. I couldn't believe it. And I've worked in the city for over 20 years now, and I have never seen anything like that. The closest thing was September 11th, but it wasn't as bad as this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that we can say that because you actually mentioned 9/11 in the book and talk about the situations there as you were working in Manhattan. But for people who don't live in New York and don't understand bright lights, big city that never sleeps, that is not an exaggeration. You can literally go to Starbucks 24 hours a day in Times Square, get a coffee. And it's not just Times Square. These places are open constantly. I mean, literally, you can do a million things in a New York minute. So from a wrestling perspective, that's got to be a little bit jarring because as a wrestler, we're used to doing, okay, well, drill, but we're used to be doing a lot of things at the same time. But man, living in the city as a wrestler, what's that like for you?
I love the speed. To me, it's like a match. Stepping out on the streets of Manhattan it's like wrestling, and it's always overtime. I mean, the speed of New York is so high and so fast. You gotta be ready. You gotta be ready to hit that 5-point move. That's how it is every single day.
5-point move. You see, I figured you was more of a freestyle guy, but you throw the Greco-Roman five. Anyway, we got 5-pointers everywhere. We don't see them too often in freestyle. But going back in time, you're a native of Iran, and you have been involved in the wrestling scene there with the New York Athletic Club, Beat the Streets. I mean, anything that comes out of New York City, you've had your hands on. The book chronicles your path from Iran to the United States and the life you've made here, and of course, the world of wrestling that you live in. A previous book that I read with another native Iranian, who also written by Craig Sesker, Afsoon Johnston, who her maiden name Afsoon Roshanzamir, one of the first women's world medalist here in USA Wrestling. She's referenced in the book. But from an Iranian wrestling community perspective, what's it like for you in the United States when you connect with fellow Iranians?
It's actually great. When I first met Absoon, I mean, I'd always heard about her, and she was just this mentor of mine, because wrestling for females in Iran is pretty much was non-existent until a couple of years ago. So she kind of broke through that, and then she was able to compete here in the States and achieve medals. And she's got such a big following in Iran, and everyone looks up to her. So it's an incredible feeling when I meet successful wrestlers, and on top of it, successful Iranian American wrestlers. I mean, we got Matt Ghaffari, we got Afsoon Roshan. So they are. It just opens up the path for many other kids and female especially, that they could achieve their dreams even if they come from a culture or society that doesn't promote the sport.
I'm going to get in your background a little bit, but I want to stay with what's been more current. We first met, I want to say 2009, 2010-ish, when the Iranian wrestling freestyle team came out to the Olympic Training Center, and Zeke Jones was there with the Iranian coach, and you were serving as the interpreter. And I remember doing the video, and I'd ask him something, I'd look at you, you'd spit it back out, and then it's kind of how we did it. And that was my first introduction to you. And Talk about that trip. What do you remember about that trip to the Olympic Training Center and kind of serving in that role? I mean, as minimal as it was at the time, and did you see that situation growing to bigger things like it did?
I never imagined that it would bring me and lead me to where I am right now as far as being this ambassador of wrestling. I just remember a friend of mine, Mehdi Kaveh, was at Brown University, and he said, "You know what? Let's try to bring Yazdani and what's his name, Sadek Gudarzi, to the U.S. with a few other athletes." And I talked to Beat the Streets at the time, Beat the Streets New York, and I told them that we would like to have these guys come in and do a clinic for the Beat the Streets kids. And it worked out. They were able to get their visas through Brown University, and Harvard assisted as well. We brought them here to New York. They did a training session. They stayed at the New York Athletic Club. And then from there, we went to the Olympic Training Center, and we were able to work out with the team there. The funny thing was, the Iranians were always late. I remember Zeke Jones was always upset. They're like, practice at 10, and these guys would roll in around 10:15, 10:30. So that was a funny experience. But overall, I didn't know back then that this would lead to multiple sports diplomacy. And that, to me, I guess, was the first taste of that sports diplomacy I had. And I didn't even know what was going on at the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned local Beat the Streets kids. Well, if you've gone to the Beat the Streets events, like I've been to a couple of them, I haven't been in a couple of years, but those preliminary matches that start during the day, you see the kids. I remember out there, and there was a kid from one of the public schools in New York, but his name was Aliyev, native Azeri. He's got Azerbaijan on the back of his single. He's a New York City kid. You have the opportunity to wrestle out there. He's a New Yorker, but he's also proud of his heritage. So you've got a lot of that in New York. You've got a literal melting pot of cultures and such. So what's it like for your current community to connect with your past community in events like Beat the Streets, and then having that opportunity to reconnect them with their homeland as well?
It's great. I mean, as you know, wrestling is a national sport in Iran, and it traces back centuries. It's part of the culture, it's part of the language, part of the literature. So wrestling plays a big role in the Iranian community, the Iranian life. It's a way of life. We were lucky enough to bring the team here in 2013 when the Olympics was considering dropping wrestling. So that was a big first test. And we were able to get the Iranian crowd here. They were supportive. We had an Iranian junior national team compete in the middle of Times Square in order to show unity between U.S., Russia, and Iran, and to save the Olympics. And I think that was a big factor. And the Iranian community came together. And then also we had multiple World Cup events in LA, which has a very, very high population of Iranians there, and they always represent. Iranians love their sports, they love their athletes, and I mean, all you gotta do is I suggest to everyone, I recommend it as a bucket list. You gotta attend a wrestling event in Iran. I think the closest thing is like a Penn State match or an Iowa match, but the Iranian fans are insane and they're so passionate, and they really don't care what country is on the mat as long as they do good sportsmanship and good technique.
Yeah, and it seems like when you watch the Iranian fans watch wrestling, I first saw it in 2003 in New York at the World Championships. Then when you actually get closer to Iran, when I was in Baku, you really saw it. And I'm surprised. I saw a huge Iranian contingent turning Denmark in 2009. It's like, it's the horns, or there's a couple different cadences that they do with it, but I equate it, and you hear Americans say all the time, wrestlers specifically say, the Iranian wrestling fans are the greatest in the world. And, as American bravado, we're like, oh, no, we're beat Carver Hawkeye. Well, here's one thing. I've been to Carver, and it is the greatest collegiate wrestling experience in wrestling. It is probably up there with any wrestling experience in the world you need to experience. But Carver doesn't have 18,000 people. Actually, in this case, all men, arm in arm, singing and chanting the entire time, like a European footy or football game, soccer game. So that's one thing that the international cultures. You guys don't have an issue with singing and joining arm in arm, hand to hand, whereas Americans tend to hey, we're cool, we'll high five somebody, but that personal space, that's a thing. Explain what it's like being in the stands as an Iranian.
It's incredible. I mean, the energy. I mean, one of the best experiences of my life was the 2017 World Cup in Kermanshah, when Team USA went in, and that was during the whole travel ban and Trump had put in the travel ban, and that to me was one of the most incredible experiences with the fans. We were in a stadium. I think it only held 3,000 or 4,000 people, but there was over 6 or 7,000 people. I mean, hanging onto the walls and windows and chanting. And I'll never forget when Jordan Burroughs used to come out to get on the mat. The whole place would go insane. I mean, to everyone there, he's like a god. He's just an incredible person, and everyone was chanting USA, which was very interesting. Obviously, the state media wouldn't televise that part, but it was. I mean, I was getting goosebumps just watching the crowd applaud the U.S. team, and then the best part was I remember one of the team members came up to me and they're like, Mo, come on, come on. And people had my picture in the stands and they had my picture. And I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And that's when I realized, I'm like, wow, there's something really big going on with this sport and being able to bring two countries together and put aside the political differences.
Now let's go back and set the stage for wrestling in America in terms of how you came to the United States. A lot of the stories sound similar in terms of people like, okay, we had to get out, we had to get a visa. There was something that went wrong, we got taken advantage of, and that's very similar with some of the things you experienced. And first things first, why did your family feel the need to come to the United States and leave Iran?
Well, I witnessed the whole revolution. I mean, I was 5. I still have some basic memory of it, but it was mostly due to the war that was going on with Iran and Iraq. It was brutal. I just remember that at nights, the sirens, going down to the shelters. You know, we couldn't have a good night's sleep at all growing up in Iran. It was right after the revolution. The government was unstable. They were trying to, I guess, create a government for themselves. And I remember they started recruiting out of our elementary school. There was an arms embargo going on. Iran had no weapons, so they were asking for volunteers. And I remember coming home and telling my mom that fifth graders, I was in second grade or third grade, and then these fifth graders and sixth graders were signing up to go to war. And also like the whole like making us chant "Death USA." I mean, we were not political at all in any sense. We were just proud Iranians. So when we saw that, and my parents like, no, 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 we don't say that "Death to America" in our house, and that's when we decided to migrate, and we traveled to Turkey to get our visa. We got our visa for the U.S., and then we migrated to Long Island, New York, where my uncle and my aunts used to live.
You know, what I find interesting about the stories, especially with you and Afsoon specifically, because that's who we're close to in the sport of wrestling, is it had to be the United States. It wasn't like, okay, well we're gonna leave, we're gonna go to Turkey, or we're gonna go to France, or we're gonna go to England. You had to come to the United States. Why was that such a crucial point for your family, your parents?
It is just, I mean, it's a land of opportunity. Like I said, in the United States, you could become anything or anyone you want with hard work, and it does pay. It's a meritocracy. And we knew, and we were hard workers, and my parents forced and encouraged us to study. And once you come to the United States, like I said, doors of opportunity open up for you as long as you have goals and you chase it. I mean, in my opinion, you could be successful anywhere, but I think in the U.S., it's a land of opportunity, and I'm just a living example of it. Through hard work, you could achieve and become whoever you want, and especially with the help of wrestling. I mean, wrestling teaches you never to give up. So.
One thing we've seen when kids that are foreign and they start wrestling, like we had a kid at my old high school. He was a Russian foreign exchange student, and oh well, Russians like wrestling, so he was out in the wrestling team, and automatically everybody thought he was so good. I mean, he picked up things quickly and he knew about the sport. Whereas you get a kid from Iran and starts wrestling who may have never wrestled before, and all of a sudden, oh well, he's Iranian, he's probably going to be good because it's in the wrestling culture there. What was your experience like when you first stepped on the wrestling mat, and how much was the Iranian wrestling culture kind of drilled in there behind in the back of your mind?
So unfortunately, I never got to wrestle in Iran, so I couldn't say I brought massive amounts of technique and knowledge to my wrestling skills in America. I am a product of USA wrestling, USA style of wrestling. I started freestyle after college, believe it or not. But I always it was part of the culture. I remember when I was growing up with my cousins, my father and my uncles would make us wrestle each other for fun. So in every household in Iran, you'll see kids wrestling, and kids know wrestling. They know the leg lace. It's just part of the culture. So I mean, coming to America naturally, that was a sport that my family would push us, wrestling or soccer. Those are the two sports of Iran. And coming to America, we were faced with hardship, a lot of economic hardship. And my parents had to get me and my brother involved into something so we don't kind of go the wrong direction or get involved with bad friends. So wrestling was the way to go. My parents got me and my brother both involved in wrestling. I started in seventh grade. Back then, there was no clubs. There was no like these private clubs they could go earlier. So seventh grade, I joined a team. I was this little chubby kid at 126 pounds. Got my butt kicked every day, and then eventually I started winning a few matches, and I loved it. I mean, once again, if you're an Iranian and you like sports, wrestling is definitely the sport you would talk about. And it's a funny thing is every time you speak to an Iranian, they always tell you, "Oh, I wrestled. I used to wrestle," which is funny. Even my dad said he used to wrestle, but I don't think he's ever stepped his foot on the mat. So.
Now, and then we talk about wrestling culture. You assimilate there in Long Island, where it's Nassau County versus Suffolk County. I mean, you're a county champ. You're a big deal. So explain what's it like growing up wrestling in wrestling-crazed Long Island as well.
I ended up going to a high school that wasn't known for wrestling. It was a North Shore of Long Island, an affluent neighborhood. They were better in like tennis and swimming.
The country club sports, so to speak.
Exactly. And I was
Jamestown High School, Virginia. I'm looking at you.
I went to Great Neck South High School, and then at that time we had a combined district, Great Neck South and North. We wrestled as one team. Like I said, we weren't a powerhouse. We always had kids at heart. And myself, I never claimed to be a great wrestler. I loved the sport. I was passionate. I was always 500, won a little more matches than I lost. I never placed in the counties. The counties was tough, man. I remember I couldn't even get out of the quarters. There was always a county champ or county place winner and then a state winner. It was insane, especially my weight class. I mean, I ended up, I wrestled at 126 my freshman year. And then by my senior, I was ranked, I was at 145. And I was ranked, I think like fourth or fifth in the county. And then I just couldn't get past. And I never placed, which is an interesting thing. I never placed in the counties, never made it to the states. So that kept me hungry. And then from there, I was like, you know what school should I go to? And I walked onto a Hofstra University. And then when I went there, Tom Ryan showed up my second year at Hofstra, which was one of the best things that ever happened to me. So I knew Tom from Long Island. And he used to have these Iowa-style wrestling camps in Long Island. And growing up, we weren't very rich. So I remember I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, me and my brother, we would like to wrestle. How much is your camp?" And I think it was a couple $100. And I said, "Oh, okay. Do you take like a layaway plan?" So he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll come and pick you up." So he used to come and pick me and my brother up every day, drive us to his 1 week camp. And I don't think he charged us anything, or if he did, it was pretty much like $20. So I guess my humanitarian work, he definitely played a key role that, just doing the right thing and helping others will go a long way.
Yeah, I remember coming through when I was at Old Dominion. Tom had been at Hofstra for quite a while, built them into a national powerhouse, and at the point been ranked as high as number 2 in the country, had beaten Minnesota in dual meet. But you're there before that. You're there as Hofstra was kind of just okay. They're in the East Coast Wrestling Association before they joined the CAA. Hofstra was just kind of Hofstra. And what was it like to kind of witness the transformation of new coach, new guy coming in? I'm going to do it my way. Here's this guy, local guy, Syracuse, Iowa, comes back and made Hofstra a national powerhouse.
It was incredible. Like he came in. I mean, our first year we were horrible. I think we were like ranked 48th in the country, and we were wrestling Lock Haven and East Stroudsburg. And I remember the first open tournament I went to. Now, keep in mind, I wasn't that good. I would never give up. But we wrestled at Penn State Open. And then we went to, I think, Michigan State Open. So those are the first 2 tournaments I was faced with. And I'm like, holy cow. I remember I wrestled, I think, Pritzloff. I forgot which one, but it was
probably Glenn in that era.
Glenn, yes.
Donnie's closer to my age. Glenn's a little older, and you're a little older than me, so that would make
Glenn,
sense.
It was at, I think, 150 or 158. And I mean, that was a tough one.
By the way, I'm sorry for that. Because that must have been painful. Glenn Pritzlaff has like the biggest monstrous cauliflower ear I've ever seen him. I mean, it's like a foot long. How do you? I mean, it's poking out behind the headgear. I mean, that guy's got to be intimidating to wrestle.
Yes, and I was hoping to headlock him because of his ears, but I didn't even get close. I remember he teched me bad, and that's when I'm like, wow, this is not like high school. And I had to pick it up. And I remember I made the lineup at 150 for Hofstra. At 150, it was Mazurko, and I couldn't beat him. So that first year was a learning experience for myself and also Tom. And then Tom eventually, after that, cleaned house, got all these new recruits in, got Roman Flazar. I mean, he put his bet on a few studs, and it turned out. Chris Weidman came a couple years later. He's from Long Island. So Tom did definitely turn it around. He's an incredible coach. I remember he used to go live with us all the time, and he just threw all of us around.
Now, the opportunity comes up. You said he cleaned house. A lot of coaches do that. There's a lot of changeover when you've got to come in and change the culture, so to speak. And the choice you made to go to Hunter College, which is in the city, a Division III school. Bob Godenzi, I think, was the coach there for forever. And you've got a lot of Hunter alums that are actually wrestling coaches in the area. I know Bruce Haberly was a guy who coaches at NYU. He was there with Bob for a while. And you know, opportunity to wrestle at Hunter, very unique type of school, is even in Division III. What was that experience like?
So I after my second year at Hofstra, at the NCAA qualifiers, I blew my knee out, and it was one of the hardest decisions I made, because I remember there was a couple of times I would weigh in at 150, and then Tom Ryan needed a 177 pounder, and he would bump me up, and I didn't care. I was like, put me out there, and he would just tell me, don't get pinned, don't get teched, and I would go out there and not get pinned or not get teched. I mean, there were times I was like 13-0 against Mike Rogers of I think he was an All-American, I believe. I remember one time we were wrestling him, and he was saying, Mo, you can't get pinned or teched. And I just held on to his fingers. I'll never forget that match. And Mike Rogers was getting so pissed. He was elbowing me in the back of the head to try to tech me. And I'm like, nope, Tom Ryan's going to make me run stairs. And even though I lost, he made me run stairs anyway. Tom Ryan made me run stairs, so I threw up.
So you've got you've mentioned wrestling Glenn Pritzlaff and Mike Rogers, who's currently the head coach at Franklin and Marshall, whose son just committed to Lehigh. So all these, you've got these connections, and I'm sure at the time they're not going to be like, this is a guy that's going to bring Iran to the U.S. I'm sure that's in the back of their mind.
Not at all. So yeah, I mean, from there, after I blew my knee out at the NCAA qualifiers, I talked to Tom. I said, Tom, I got to transfer. My grades are not where I want to be. I was pre-med major. Obviously, all foreigners want to become doctors in America, which that changed quickly. And then I looked around. I said, where could I transfer to? And I told Tom, I said, hey, don't take it personal. I love you to death. I won't be able to give you what you want as a 150-pounder. And he was bringing all these new people in. And to be honest, I don't even know if I would have made the lineup. I mean, he was bringing some studs in, and it didn't make sense for me. So I decided to look around. Albany had just dropped their program. They were a grade D3 school, and the Hunter College in Manhattan. And hey, what better place to live in Manhattan and go to school and wrestle? So I went to Hunter College. It was great. I met some of my best friends there. A lot of people transferred from NC State. We had a lot of transfers that came through the doors of Hunter College. It was in Manhattan, right near the New York Athletic Club, where we could go and train there on Tuesdays and Thursdays with the greatest wrestlers of the world, in my opinion, that used to come there back in the early 90s. And so that's what happened. Bob Godenzi was a coach. Great guy. I wrestled there for 3 years. I was a runner-up in the conference there, but I never made the dance. You know, that dance they always talks about. So I never made it to the county finals, never made it to the states. I never made it to the NCAAs. And I thought I was going to do it because during the summers when I was at Hunter, I would go to Iran and train there with the junior national team.
Yeah, and what's interesting is maybe now the way the regionals are set up in Division III, and some of these conferences back in the day, it was very much like Division I in terms of historical data. Certain conferences only got a certain amount of bids. I remember the New England Conference had like a true double elimination. Like if you lost early, you had to come back and like beat the guy twice. It was crazy with some of these larger conferences, and of course in some of these smaller ones, it's like win, that's it, and you might get one wild card per the conference. So. Let's fast forward your career into today's situation. You might have been there, man. It's just like one of those, like, come on. But in terms of Division III as an opportunity, that's one thing that I've kind of been waving the flag on, is there's more to life in college wrestling than just Division I. Talk about what did the opportunity in Division III wrestling do for you, not just as a wrestler, but you as a person and for your future life outside of wrestling?
Listen, when I first transferred, I was like, national champ, 3 years in a row. This is nothing. And let me tell you, I had a rude awakening at the first tournament. It was at the Ethica tournament in the quarterfinals. I'm wrestling the returning national champ from Trenton State, College of New Jersey. And I remember the whole place was watching us wrestle. And I got a good beating there too, because I underestimated it. I was like, you know what, I'm going to walk through this tournament. And that's when I realized, it's just, it doesn't matter if it's Division 1, 2, or 3. It's just these athletes, these hardcore athletes that are hungry. Division 3 also, gave me a chance to be able to work a little bit. There wasn't as much pressure as in Division 1. Division 1 is like a full-time job, in my opinion. Whereas Division 3, you kind of have to be responsible and create your own plan of success.
One thing that we've seen in getting back to your world of wrestling is the growth of your world of sports diplomacy. It's something that you jumped into again with bringing, as using yourself as a translator, and then at what point who is the one that really reaches out and says, hey, that kind of brings you into the circle of trust, more so to where all of a sudden now Jordan Burroughs knows who Mo is. Like everybody in the United States, when it comes to wrestling, knows who you are now, and that wasn't the case. Who really helped launch that for you?
Well, you know what? The funny thing is, I didn't even know that this path is going to bring me to this point. I was involved with Beat the Streets, and like I said, in 2009, we brought the Iranians here. In 2013, once again, Beat the Streets asked me to help with the Iranians. So I was their translator and their go-to person. And then from there, USA Wrestling, Rich Bender relies on me. I'm involved in a couple of his committees there. So it's just doing the right thing over the years and years. And I've invested so much time in helping without asking for anything. Because once again, I love the sport. So I keep on doing it and volunteering myself. And eventually I've developed trust, I've been able to produce and bring to the table. I've done the same thing overseas. I've developed these relationships with Rasul Khadem, who used to be the 96 Olympic champ. He's an incredible human being. And when he was the head of the federation, I was able to assist him and the USA team in making everything smooth. The translations, when situations were created, I was able to tone it down and not inflame the situations. So once again, it's just being able to deliver and then not falsely promise people. When I couldn't bring a team, I pretty much told them, hey, this is not going to happen. Don't waste your time. And if you want, you could go on doing with somebody else, but I'm telling you, this is not going to happen. So I'm lucky enough and I'm blessed to have the right people around me that could make things happen or tell me the honest truth that it won't be able to happen. So I would have to thank Beat the Streets. Kira Barry has played a very important role in always supporting me. Andy Barth, he's another great person that trusts in my advice. He's brought me on the board of Titan Mercury, so I'm able to help them out now. Rich Bender, USA Wrestling, I'm under International Relations Committee. Once again, just listening to me and then knowing that I'll bring the right advice to the table has helped me a lot.
Go ahead and bring up the website. This is your website at HoomanTavakolian.com, where you can get the book, Hooman's Hope. And I guess the first question I've got to ask you when it comes to the book, what is your hope?
My hope is just bring people together. Wrestling gave me hope, right, of success. So I believe if people just put their differences aside and we can make the world a better place. I always talk about how the wrestling mat is just the example of the real life, real world. You step out there. You got people with different flags, different names, different cultures, but at the end of the day, they all shake hands. So my hope is to create a better place, to create a better world through dialogue, through communication, to being able to sit down and communicate. And why not the sport of wrestling? The sport of wrestling, the thing about the sport of wrestling is it caters to all social classes. If you notice, you'll have somebody super rich and then somebody super poor that all could relate and watch it. When I watch tennis, it's specific audience for tennis or golf. But in wrestling, internationally, you got the religious sector, and then you got the non-religious sector. You got the athletes. Everyone could relate to the sport of wrestling. So therefore, I think wrestling is a very powerful tool in bringing people together to the table to negotiate, discuss.
when we dive in, and I guess the first thing that I wonder is somebody that's been a writer for a long, long time, is when it comes time to write a book, how do you do it? How long had you been sitting there thinking about writing it, and how do you go about contacting Craig Sesker to help you put pen to paper on this?
I've known Greg for a while. I've known him for, I think we took him to Iran one year. Yeah, with Titan Mercury, we took him to Iran one year. So I've always read his pieces. I'm a big fan of his sports writing. And I remember he reached out to me and he kept on telling me you have a great story, but I didn't believe him. I'm like, I'm really, it's not a big deal. I'm just like a typical foreigner chasing the dream in America. And eventually we sat down and he said, I'm writing up soon, and I think your story should be heard by the Americans because nobody really knows much about you they see on the wrestling world. So I said, you know what, let's do it. Let's do it. I still don't think I have a incredible story. I'm just a regular guy trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, but I am an staunchly apolitical. I hate politics. I hate talking politics. I hate even drawing politics into it. But when we talk about the relationship between Iran and the United States, you can't not mention politics. And when we try to, there's the brotherhood, the iconic picture from the Olympics with Goodarzi and Burroughs arm in arm that just kind of embodied the greatness and the borders that are broken when it comes to the sport. Then we have situations where, all right, Iran and the U.S. are wrestling in New York City. Awesome. And then all of a sudden we've got the political jarring starts and teams got to go home or a team can't come. How frustrating is it for you, somebody who wants to put two great wrestling nations together who want to compete against each other? I mean, Yazdani and Taylor would probably like to mix it up quite a bit given the opportunity and the roadblocks we have with the two nations' governments not seeing eye to eye on pretty much anything. How difficult is it for you, not just as someone who's trying to set up wrestling events with the two countries, but you as being an American and being an Iranian at the same time?
It is very difficult. I mean, in the beginning, I would get so frustrated because you would put so much time and passion and love into it. And then with just one phone call, everything would be canceled. I mean, like I said, we were trying to bring the Iranians to New York for years. And they would say yes, yes, yes. And the last second, they wouldn't show up or they would have canceled. So we had to work through that and then find the right appropriate people. So in the beginning, initial stage, they would tell us, yes, we could do it or no, because of political climate, we can't. So it's just knowing the right people, also understanding the political climate there, and then being able to let USA Wrestling know that things are not okay there. Like let's not send a team yet. Let's just wait for things to calm down. But once again, I mean, I've never felt unsafe with the U.S. team when they go there. I mean, they give the royal treatment. The fans go nuts. So it is very frustrating to answer your question. It is very frustrating, but you got to be able to be patient and look for that window of opportunity, which always opens up. You just got to be ready for it.
Yeah, and I'm also curious on the connections that it takes because in the past we've got issues with visas or something. It's like, okay, we got to call the State Department. I can't just call the State Department and be like, hey, I need a visa. Let's do it. Or we need to let these people in. It's been years of building those contacts. So, I mean, how do you guys go about contacting the State Department in terms of saying, hey, we need to get these people in pretty quickly versus it being at the end of the line and, take a number and you're sitting there for weeks at a time?
It's just through USA Wrestling and the U.S. Olympic Committee. I mean, they are people at the State Department that believe in people-to-people diplomacy. There are congressmen and senators also that believe in that too. I think it's great. People that are pro people-to-people diplomacy. I think that's the biggest factor in showing the other side that the people here are like just like you. I mean, that's been my mission to show that Americans love wrestling. Americans love the Iranian people, and then vice versa. I mean, once again, the media don't do it right. I mean, a lot of times I have my family calling me from Iran and asking me if I'm safe because they show something that happened or there's crime here. So there's a lot
I
of
live in
propaganda around
Minnesota,
it.
man. Everybody's wondering how safe Minneapolis is right now. I'm not catching it to quite that effect, but I'm fine. We're fine. So, I can a little bit relate.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I've never felt unsafe there, but I think the key is just to find people that see the big picture, and just put their, I guess, put their prejudice, I guess, aside and just say, hey, this is bigger than just this one trip to Iran. This is bigger. And once you see that point, how big this could be when a U.S. team goes to Iran, I think that's when people kind of realize that we are making a difference. We are showing people there that we as Americans are the same as you.
when we talk about those situations, and then you chronicle these things in the book, was there any caution on your side to say, all right, I got to be careful with what I write about what I remember on the bad side of about Iran? I mean, where's the line with what you will put and what you wouldn't put in the book?
As always, I mean, I try to stay out of the politics because I do travel there a lot to do charity work. So once again, I mean, I can't change a government, or I try not to interfere with domestic issues. I'm just there to help these kids. I mean, if I could help kids and create a better path for them and educate them and make them worldly, I think that helps a lot. It helps everyone. It makes the world a better place. And that's what my charity, Humanities, is about, reinstating hope in humanity through sports. So that's what I've been involved with a couple of years as well. I focus on adolescent youth, just with Beat the Streets. I have a scholarship that we give to kids. I think there's a quote that says it's easier to, I guess, to raise right kids than to fix broken men. I forgot how it exactly goes, but it's easier to focus on the kids, give them the right guidance, give them the right coaching in life, and then therefore the future will be brighter.
One of the big, I guess, lightning rod political. It has been political. It's been politicized. Is the death of Navid Afghari, which had been kind of caught a social media fire. I mean, Russ Like a Girl's been involved. There's been media from around the world's been involved, and from an outsider's perspective, what's something like that do for you? Because it's like, okay, I see my homeland and I see the sport of wrestling so revered there, and then you don't know what to believe in terms of what news is coming out about what happened there. So I guess kind of explain your perspective on that whole situation with this wrestler who was executed.
I got a lot of heat for that because I really didn't make a public statement. I didn't know the facts. And I said, you know what? If I go, it wouldn't do anything for him if I spoke publicly about it. It would just create more issues for the people I was helping. So, uh, and I remember we had a call about it, and I said, listen, what is the purpose of this call? To stop the execution, to change the judicial system in Iran? I said, he's been convicted. I don't know the facts. And I think, in my personal opinion, was the more the US got involved, the worse his case became. And I was told that his case was expedited because of the US involvement. I didn't know much about it. I called around. They told me, don't pursue this any longer. I mean, it had become so political because I believe the Trump administration had made a statement as well.
And
And
at
they
some
were
point,
saying,
does it become out of spite in terms of where now this it's not about this wrestler, it's about using him as a political figure, as a pawn to be like, aha, watch this, US, or back and forth. I mean, that's again, the two countries do not get along politically. And
exactly.
you
I
know,
mean, that was the thing. I said, I don't know the facts. I am not going to emotionally go ahead. 1,000 kids rely on my help. And I didn't want to get tripped up. And I mean, I called around. People were saying that he had done the act. I mean, once again, I wasn't there. I didn't know, and I didn't feel like me posting on Instagram would have done anything. The decision was already made, unfortunately.
I mean, there's
To
a difference between outrage and outrage for social, because we know that sometimes, as much as we want to fight a good fight, one person can make a difference, but sometimes one person's like, well, I can't, I'm not going to sit there and do regime change from my office. It's just not going to happen. So,
yeah.
talking about better things and things that I was just kind of curious on that, since that's been wrestling in the news, is you talk about your foundation, Humanities. It's a play off your name. And when did you start that? And you've touched on what it basically is about, but as far as the genesis of the organization and how have you been able to grow it over the years, talk about Humanities a bit.
So that came about right after the whole bombing of the wrestling gym in Afghanistan in Kabul. I believe it was in 2018. I remember ISIS walked into a gym that minority Shia Muslims were training kids. They walked in with two gym bags and blew up the gym and killed, I think, 30 people, 30 kids, and devastated. That's when I reached out to the USA wrestling community. We put a GoFundMe. We were able to raise money. And to me, that was so symbolic because we showed them that the American people care. Nothing to do with politics, ISIS, or anything. We were able to rebuild that gym, provide mats, gear. I mean, Nike and Shane. Shane was great. Cliff Keen, all these companies came together, universities, Penn State, Iowa Wrestling, they all donated gear. And we were able to rebuild that gym even better with extra security guard. And then with that, we went on and fixed two other gyms and remodeled two other gyms. And we were able to make the gyms usable and get these kids off the streets. I mean, my logic was the more kids that we get off the streets, the safer the people are, the safer our American troops are. A lot of these kids are orphaned on the streets, and you have the wrong people coming and recruiting them, providing them room and board. And next thing you know, they are wearing a vest and they walk into an American facility and hurt the Americans. So why not instead have them go to a wrestling gym and get them involved with the sport of wrestling? And that's what I've been doing. So after that, I'm like, you know what? This might be a great thing. So I started Humanities. And then with Humanities, I'm not able to use that charity for Iran because of the sanctions. So I try to keep everything separate. So I've been working a lot in Iran. That's all been family and friends money, personal money that I have. Helping build schools. I've built 2 schools by the border of Afghanistan and Iran for these villages there that pretty much, they don't belong to any country. I mean, they don't have identification, passport, or birth certificate. These are the villages that ISIS would infiltrate the border and steal their sheep and goat and their daughters and females for their own personal use. Also, females there that are young girls are married off early because they don't have any source of income and they cost money. So now, with the help of Rasul Kadem and Kumail Ghasemi and all these Olympians, we're able to teach these females, young females, how to knit rugs. So therefore, they bring value to the families, and we're trying to break these old traditions of wedding off young girls. And now we provide them school and education. On this my last trip, which was a month ago, 2 months ago, I went there and I was building a school, and we had the grand opening. And I remember talking to a 6-year-old girl that was an orphan, and I said, "What are you doing?" She goes, "I want to go to school." And I said, "What do you want to become?" She goes, "A teacher." So I'm like, "Oh, that's great." So you could educate kids. And she goes, "No, so I could buy a pair of sneakers." And to me, that really touched me. Her dream is to have a pair of sneakers.
Yeah, and as we see, speaking of sneakers, I mean, we see people on an app every time a new shoe from Nike drops, clamoring about dropping $200 on a pair of shoes. I know I'm guilty of it. And you sit there, and that really puts things in perspective. A pair of sneakers is something that somebody on the other side of the world longs to have. Become a teacher so they can buy a pair of sneakers. It really puts things in perspective.
It's insane. Also, like running water, things we take for granted. I mean, they had a 50-gallon tanker for water for the month, and that's it. That's what they use for cooking, cleaning, showering, and everything else. So when I was standing there, and then I opened the tanker, and there was like a dead cockroach, dirt in there, and that's what they use. And then I'm like, wow, we're in the 21st century, and this is what's going on. So that's really, I mean, every trip I take, I come back a different person. A piece of me stays there, and it's really hard coming back. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so blessed. And I see my kids asking for PlayStation 5, and I'm like, are you guys serious? So it just puts everything in perspective. And I'm doing all this. Hopefully, my kids will follow my path and realize that there are people out there that are kind of would give anything to have a piece of bread or a piece of meat. I mean, some people eat meat once a month, these places I'm traveling. But the craziest thing is they're the most hospitable people. They have nothing to offer, but they'll offer you everything they have when you visit them.
And to talk about that impact, I mean, there's people within the United States that have seen your impact and wanted to be a part of this. I want to come back to the book. And Jordan Burroughs wrote the foreword for it. And when that opportunity arose, and somebody that's been as iconic in the sport of American wrestling, and somebody that's been as iconic in the sport worldwide over the past decade, what did it mean to have Jordan involved in this book?
Well, I mean, I love Jordan. To me, he's a great human being. Besides being a great athlete, it's just the energy he brings in, what he stands for, especially in Iran. In Iran, they symbolize or they iconize their athletes just like Takhti, being a great champion in Iran is not only about medals. I've talked about this many times. It's about doing acts of kindness, humanitarian work. And that's what glorifies you in the sports world in Iran. So you could have 10 Olympic medals and not help anyone. And then you could have somebody that has maybe one world medal, an Asian medal, but he helps society. That person will get more respect. And that's how they see Jordan. They call him the champion of people. And that's very important. And me and Jordan always talked about doing a tour in Iran. And hopefully, once this pandemic goes away, I could bring him to Iran and we'll do a tour. And I think that would make a huge impact on everyone from a sports diplomacy perspective, from a humanitarian perspective. So having Jordan write a forward, it was a great honor for me. I love him. He's a great human being, and I will never forget the things he's done and how many lives he's impacted. Believe it or not, in Iran, many people want to be like him, and that's huge. That's priceless.
So what's next for you? We've got the Olympics coming up in a couple weeks. We got no spectators. I'm not sure who's part of the contingent or not, or whether or not you're able to go to Tokyo or not. But if you are, if you're not, what are you looking forward to about the games when we talk about some actual lucha libre, some wrestling? What do they call it? What's wrestling in what's wrestling called in Iran?
Kushti.
Kushti. Okay, yeah, because I know in Turkey it's Guresh. We've got Borba. We've got lucha. So I mean, I just
And I believe some other countries call it Pahlavani. I think Pakistan and Afghanistan call it Pahlavani, which is like a chivalry kind of sport. What's next for me? I mean, I am sitting this Olympics out. I went to Rio and it was hectic. I mean, to me that was a crazy. But I'm definitely planning on going to the World Championships. I would like to go to the World Championships. As you know, I'm part of UWU Asia, so I'm involved with that, and I'm dying to get back on tour with USA Wrestling to see what international tournaments they have. I miss it so much. I mean, I miss the wrestling so much. I was at the Olympic trials, and hopefully, when things settle down, we'd like to take a Titan Mercury team either to Iran or Turkmenistan. I know Turkmenistan has asked us to bring a team, and now I'm on the board of Beat the Streets, and hoping I could speak to Andy Barth and see if we could bring a team there.
To
the World Club.
Turkmenistan.
Yeah, they've been asking us for the past couple of years to bring a team there to wrestle, which was pretty cool. I'm also have been asked to assist with the female wrestling style. It's classic style, which is I guess the Muslim version of wrestling for females. So that's another project that I am working on. I'm hoping to do it, and it would be ideal to take like a Helen Morales or a Alan Gray for these girls because they look up to them, or even Apsoon. So we're talking about maybe hosting that in Armenia with UW Asia, and with classic wrestling, it's kind of they got the hijab and the outfit because of cultural restrictions or religious restrictions. So this new style kind of expands wrestling to a group that were not allowed to wrestle before. Now it expands the sport and brings more people to participate. So we're looking for sponsors for that, and that would be huge. If I could bring one of the U.S. wrestling stars to this, it would be incredible.
Yeah, and as far as that women's classic wrestling, I know that in one of the Olympic Games I saw a track athlete from Bahrain wearing pretty much the headpiece and basically a full body suit. It was, I mean, if you're a fan of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it looked like they were wearing Green Man. Is that the type of outfit you would kind of see these typically Islamic nations that are going to finally allow their women to wrestle? Is not necessarily the baggy flowing or a gi, but something that's more like a track runner would wear to just cover the extremities.
Yeah, it's like the Nike hijab, and then they got to wear these. I mean, I guess the whole point is just make sure it's not tight body suits, so their curves are not showing. So I guess long shirt that covers their behind, or the chest is not too tight. So that's the thing. This way, a lot of families will then allow it, or the cultural restrictions kind of are loosened up a little bit. And then I think the referee has to be female. So but I know a lot of people think it's ridiculous, but I think it opens up a lot of doors for these females and empowers them, which is key. So they won't be suppressed. I mean, this is the first stepping stone, which is huge, and I'm happy to be involved with this. And hopefully, this will go through either Azerbaijan or Armenia or Turkey. So hopefully, we'll have something in place.
Yeah, you got to crawl before you can walk. You can't just go straight singlet from nothing. So, Mo, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you again. The book right here, we'll drop the link up on the screen for those of you watching at Hooman, Tavakolian.com, $25. It's a quality read. It gives you a background, more than just what we did. We just scratched the surface with Mo today. All that information and more in Hooman's Hope, written by Mo right here with Craig Sesker and a forward by Jordan Burroughs. So, Mo, appreciate the time, and good luck to you, man. We'll see you down the line.
Thank you very much for your time. It's an honor. And once again, I'm hoping to give some of the proceeds from the book sale back to wrestling and the charity and helping, I guess, save kids around the world and, just do for them what wrestling did for me.